The text message burned my eyes as I read it for the third time. You won't be joining us. My husband prefers to keep it only family. My breath caught in my throat, and I pressed a hand against my ribs as they tightened with each shallow gasp. This was my daughter, the same daughter whose house I had paid for in full just months earlier, emptying my savings account without a second thought. The phone trembled in my grip as the bitter irony settled like poison in my throat. What I did next would change everything between us forever. Before we continue, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The turkey was already defrosting in my refrigerator when my phone buzzed. 18 pounds of butterball, just like I'd brought to every Thanksgiving dinner for the past 5 years since Margaret died. Sarah had called me 3 days ago, her voice bright with excitement as we planned our menu together. Dad, I'm so excited for Thursday. Derek's finally going to try your famous stuffing recipe, and I bought those little cranberry sauce molds you love. She'd laughed, the sound warm and familiar. Should we have dinner at 2 or 3? Derek wants to watch some football game, but I told him family comes first. But over the past 6 months, things have been changing. Slowly, subtly. The phone calls had become shorter, less frequent. Sarah's voice had started carrying a different tone, careful, measured, like someone walking on eggshells. When I'd drop by unannounced, Derek would answer the door with that polite smile that never reached his eyes, explaining that Sarah was resting or busy with housework. The Sunday dinners we'd shared for 32 years had dwindled to every other week, then once a month, then when Derek's schedule allows. Family photos had disappeared from Sarah's social media, replaced by couple shots where her smile looked strained around the edges. I'd spent Monday shopping for ingredients, Tuesday prepping vegetables, and Wednesday morning seasoning the bird. The dining room table in my small apartment was covered with grocery bags, fresh herbs, homemade bread for stuffing, and the good wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. Everything Sarah had requested, plus a few surprises I knew would make her smile. At exactly 11:30 on Wednesday morning, as I was chopping celery and humming along to the radio, my phone lit up with a text message from Sarah. The text message burned my eyes as I read it for the third time. You won't be joining us. My husband prefers to keep it only family. My breath caught in my throat, and I pressed a hand against my ribs as they tightened with each shallow gasp. This was my daughter, the same daughter who used to call me every Sunday, who used to save me the wishbone every Thanksgiving, who used to introduce me as my dad, my hero. When did I stop being family? The phone trembled in my grip as the bitter irony of the situation settled like poison in my throat. I set the phone down and stared at the turkey in my sink. 18 pounds of bird that would now go to waste. But it wasn't really about the turkey, was it? It was about the pattern I'd been refusing to see. The gradual erosion of 32 years of father-daughter bond, orchestrated by a man who'd entered our lives less than 2 years ago. The house. The memory surfaced unbidden. 8 months ago, when Sarah had come to me crying about Derek's credit problems, about the perfect house they couldn't afford. I'd emptied my savings account without a second thought. $243,000 because that's what fathers do for their daughters. But now, apparently, I wasn't family enough to share a Thanksgiving meal in the house I'd bought for her. I pulled out my phone and typed back, Sarah, what's going on? We planned this dinner together 3 days ago. Her response came immediately. Derek thinks it would be better if we establish some boundaries. He says it's healthy for married couples to prioritize their nuclear family unit. Nuclear family unit. Those weren't Sarah's words. My daughter had never talked like a psychology textbook. I tried calling. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. Something was very wrong here, and for the first time in months, I was going to find out exactly what Derek Thompson had been doing to my daughter. I walked to my filing cabinet with purpose now, no longer the confused father, but the man who'd raised Sarah alone after her mother died. In the bottom drawer, beneath tax documents and insurance papers, lay the folder containing the deed to 15 Maple Grove Lane. the house Derek thought he owned. Maybe it was time he learned the truth. The drive to Sarah's house gave me 23 minutes to think, and by the time I pulled into the driveway at 15 Maple Grove Lane, my confusion had crystallized into something harder. Not revenge, not yet, but a father's determination to understand what had happened to his relationship with his daughter. Derek's BMW sat in the driveway like a black wall between me and the front door. Through the living room window, I could see shadows moving. Sarah's small frame and Derek's broader silhouette engaged in what looked like a heated discussion. I knocked instead of using the doorbell. 3 firm raps that announced I wasn't going anywhere. Derek answered, his face cycling through surprise, annoyance, and finally settling on condescending patience. "Andrew, I thought Sarah explained." "She did. I'd like to hear it from you." I kept my voice level reasonable. "Help me understand why I'm suddenly not family anymore." Derek stepped onto the porch, pulling the door mostly closed behind him, creating a barrier, blocking my view of Sarah. "Look, I know this is hard for you to accept, but Sarah and I are trying to build something here, just the two of us. That means setting healthy boundaries." Boundaries. I tested the word. "Is that what you call canceling Thanksgiving dinner after we spent 3 days planning it together?" Sarah gets overwhelmed when she tries to manage too many relationships at once. The stress isn't good for her. Derek's voice carried the practiced tone of someone who'd rehearsed this explanation. "I'm trying to protect her." Through the gap in the door, I caught a glimpse of Sarah sitting on the couch, her phone in her hands, her shoulders curved inward like she was trying to make herself smaller. Protect her from what? From her father? From feeling obligated to maintain relationships that drain her energy. Derek's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Sarah told me how guilty she feels when she can't live up to your expectations, how much pressure you put on her to be the perfect daughter." That stopped me cold. Sarah said that. She's mentioned it several times, the constant phone calls, the unannounced visits, the way you make her feel responsible for your loneliness since her mother died. Derek shrugged with practiced sympathy. "I'm just trying to help her find some balance." Each word hit like a physical blow. Was that really how Sarah saw our relationship? Had I been the problem all along? I'd like to hear this from Sarah herself. She's not up for a difficult conversation right now. She's already upset about having to disappoint you. Then maybe we should postpone this discussion until she's feeling better. Derek's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Andrew, I think it's time you accepted that Sarah's priorities have changed. She has a husband now, a marriage to protect. That has to come first." Behind him I heard Sarah's voice, muffled but audible. "Derek, who are you talking to?" "Nobody important, babe. Just handling something. Nobody is important." The phrase hung in the air between us like a slap. "I see." I pulled the property deed from my jacket pocket, still folded. "Derek, there's something I think you should know about this house you're so eager to protect Sarah in." His eyes flicked to the paper in my hands, and for just a moment his confident mask slipped. "What is that?" "Why don't you invite me inside and I'll show you?" Derek glanced over his shoulder toward Sarah, then back at me. I could see him calculating, weighing risks, trying to figure out how to maintain control of the situation. 5 minutes, he said finally, stepping aside. "Then I need you to leave." I walked into the living room where Sarah sat curled on the cream-colored sofa, tissue paper scattered around her like fallen snow. When she looked up at me, her eyes were red-rimmed and apologetic. "Dad, I'm so sorry about dinner. I know you were looking forward to it, but Derek thinks—" "What do you think, sweetheart?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. She glanced at Derek, then back at me, her mouth opening and closing without sound. "Sarah doesn't need to justify our decisions to anyone," Derek interjected, moving to stand behind the sofa with his hand possessively on Sarah's shoulder. "We've made our choice as a couple." I unfolded the deed slowly, deliberately. "Derek, do you know what this document is?" Derek's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides as he struggled to maintain his practiced smile. Some kind of legal paper, I assume. The deed to this house. Would you like to know whose name is on the ownership line? The color drained from Derek's face like water from a broken glass. Sarah sat up straighter. Dad, what are you talking about? Your husband seems to think he has the authority to decide who's welcome in this house. I thought he should know who actually owns it. Derek's mouth opened and closed twice before any sound came out. That's impossible. We signed papers. We own this house. No, Derek. You signed a rental agreement. I own this house. You've been my tenants for the past 8 months. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway and Sarah's sharp intake of breath. That can't be right, Sarah whispered. Derek, you said we owned it. You said it was ours. Derek's hand slipped from her shoulder as he stared at the deed. There must be some mistake. The only mistake, I said quietly, was mine. I thought I was helping you build a life together. I didn't realize I was being manipulated by someone who wanted to cut me out of that life entirely. Sarah stood up from the couch, her legs unsteady. Dad, I don't understand. If you own the house, why didn't you tell me? Because I trusted your husband to take care of you. To include me in the family we were all supposed to be building together. I looked directly at Derek. I was wrong. Derek stepped backward until his legs hit the coffee table. His hands flew up in front of his chest as if to ward off a physical blow. You can't just... There are laws about landlord harassment. You can't use property ownership to manipulate. Manipulate? The word came out sharper than I intended. Like manipulating my daughter into thinking her father is a burden? Like manipulating her into cutting off the relationship that's been the center of her life for 32 years? Sarah sank back onto the couch, her face pale with realization. Derek, did you know about the house? Derek's mouth worked silently, opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. Answer her, I said. I suspected something wasn't quite right with the paperwork, but I thought maybe it was just a temporary arrangement until... Until what? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Until I could figure out how to handle it. Sarah looked between Derek and me, her world visibly cracking apart. Handle it how? Derek didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was written all over his face. I folded the deed and put it back in my pocket. I'm going home now. I think you two have some things to discuss. As I walked toward the front door, Sarah's voice stopped me. Dad, are you going to make us leave? I turned back to see my daughter, my little girl who used to climb into my lap when thunderstorms scared her, looking at me with the same frightened eyes. Sweetheart, this is your home. It always has been, but I won't be treated like a stranger anymore. I left them sitting in the living room I'd paid for, surrounded by the silence of 32 years of trust slowly breaking apart. I sat in my kitchen until 3 a.m, staring at my coffee cup and trying to understand where everything had gone wrong. The turkey still sat in my refrigerator, an 18-pound reminder of the family dinner that would never happen. When had Sarah stopped being the confident, spirited woman I'd raised and become this anxious, apologetic stranger who asked permission to have feelings? The change had been so gradual, I'd almost missed it. Like watching someone drown in slow motion. It started 18 months ago when Sarah brought Derek home for the first time. She'd bounced through my front door like she was 17 again, her cheeks flushed and her eyes bright with that particular shine that only comes with new love. Dad, I want you to meet someone very special, she'd said, practically glowing with happiness. Derek had followed behind her, all confident handshakes and practiced charm. Everything about him was perfectly calibrated. His handshake firm but not aggressive. His compliments specific but not excessive. His questions thoughtful but not intrusive. He'd complimented my lawn, admired my tool shed, and asked about my 43 years working at the steel mill with what seemed like genuine interest. But something about Derek felt rehearsed, like listening to someone perform a role rather than having a conversation. Still, Sarah was radiating joy in a way I hadn't seen since before her mother died, so I swallowed my unease and focused on her happiness. The courtship was swift and intense. Derek sent flowers to Sarah's office, planned elaborate weekend getaways, and proposed with a diamond ring that cost more than I made in 3 months. Sarah called me at 6 in the morning after he proposed, sobbing with joy. "Dad, he did it! He actually did it! We're getting married." I'd driven to her apartment in my pajamas and found her dancing around her living room in her bathrobe, that diamond catching the morning light on her finger. She was so happy, so completely radiant, that I pushed aside my lingering doubts about Derek's too smooth charm and focused on planning a wedding. The changes started small. Phone calls that ended abruptly when Derek walked into the room. Plans that got canceled because Derek had business dinners that required Sarah's attendance. The way Sarah's laugh got quieter and her explanations got longer and more apologetic. "Derek thinks it would be better if we host Thanksgiving this year instead of going to Dad's," became "Derek's family has different traditions," which became "Derek thinks we should focus on building our own traditions as a couple." Each conversation felt like watching Sarah disappear a little more. Then came the house hunting crisis last winter. Sarah had called me on a Tuesday, her voice thick with tears. "Dad, we found it. The perfect house. But Derek's credit is complicated. The bank wants a 40% down payment we don't have. We'll lose it to another buyer unless we can come up with the money in 30 days. She'd cried in my kitchen while explaining their financial situation. Derek's consulting business had hit some rough patches. His credit score was damaged from some previous investments that hadn't worked out. They'd applied to multiple lenders but kept getting rejected. "I know it's too much to ask," she'd whispered, the same words she'd used as a little girl when she wanted something she knew we couldn't afford. "But Dad, this house could be our fresh start. A place where Derek and I can really build something together." I'd looked at my daughter, my only child, the center of my universe since Margaret's car accident 8 years earlier, and seen her dreams crumbling in real time. The way her shoulders curved inward, the way she picked at her fingernails until they bled, the way she apologized for asking, as if wanting a home with her husband was somehow selfish. So I mortgaged my future for hers. The paperwork took 2 weeks. I'd met with lawyers, bankers, and real estate agents, structuring the purchase so Derek's credit wouldn't be an issue. Derek had insisted on handling most of the legal details through a friend who was supposedly a lawyer. I'd been uncomfortable with the arrangement, but Sarah had begged me to trust Derek's judgment. "He knows about these things, Dad. Business and legal stuff. I don't want to mess anything up." I'd emptied my retirement account on a Thursday morning, watching 43 years of careful savings disappear in a single electronic transfer. $243,000. Money I'd planned to live on for the next 20 years, gone to buy my daughter a dream. Sarah had cried when I handed her the keys. Real tears, the kind that come from a place deeper than gratitude. "Dad, I promise we'll pay you back. Every penny. Derek has some deals coming through that should cover everything within a year." "Don't worry about paying me back," I'd told her, meaning it. "Just be happy, sweetheart. That's all the payment I need." For the first few months, everything seemed perfect. Sarah sent photos of their decorating progress, invited me for Sunday dinners in their new dining room, and talked excitedly about the future. Derek was polite, appreciative, and seemed genuinely committed to making Sarah happy. But gradually, the invitations became less frequent. The phone calls grew shorter. When I'd stop by unannounced, Derek would answer the door with explanations about why Sarah was unavailable. "She's napping. She's on a work call. She's not feeling well." The Sunday dinners that had been a tradition since Sarah was 5 years old became monthly obligations, then sporadic occurrences, then "we'll call you when we're free." Each cancellation came with elaborate explanations about Derek's work schedule, Sarah's stress levels, and their need for couple time to strengthen their marriage. The explanations were always reasonable, always delivered with sympathy for my disappointment and always non-negotiable. I'd started to feel like a visitor in my daughter's life instead of a participant. Tonight's text message wasn't the beginning of something new. It was the culmination of 18 months of systematic isolation, the final step in Derek's plan to erase me from Sarah's world entirely. But Derek had made one critical mistake. He'd forgotten that the house where he was making these decisions, where he felt entitled to exclude Sarah's father from family gatherings, didn't actually belong to him. The phone rang at 6:30. Sarah's number on the caller ID. This time, I was ready. "Dad?" Sarah's voice cracked through the phone speaker like thin ice under pressure. Can we talk?" Derek left to go think things over. I set my coffee cup down carefully. After last night's confrontation, I'd expected Derek to try damage control, not disappear. Where did he go? I don't know. He got a phone call around midnight and left. He said he needed to handle some things and would be back later. Her voice carried a tremor I hadn't heard since she was a little girl afraid of the dark. "Dad, I've been up all night thinking about what you said. About the house, about everything. What did Derek tell you after I left?" "That's just it." He barely said anything. When I asked him to explain about the house paperwork, he got defensive and angry. He said you were trying to manipulate us, that you were using money to control my life. Sarah's breath hitched. "But Dad, if that were true, why would you have kept paying for everything all these months without ever mentioning it?" The question hung between us, and I could hear her starting to piece together the truth she'd been kept from seeing. "Sarah, I need to tell you some things, and I need you to listen without defending Derek or making excuses. Can you do that?" "Yes." "The house isn't the only thing Derek has been lying about. I hired a lawyer yesterday to look into his background." Silence. Then, "You what?" "When someone tries to cut me out of my daughter's life, I want to know who I'm dealing with. Sarah, Derek Thompson isn't who he claims to be." I pulled out the folder my lawyer had prepared overnight public records that painted a very different picture of the man Sarah had married. Derek's consulting business doesn't exist. It was dissolved by the state 18 months ago for failing to file tax returns. He hasn't reported any legitimate business income in over 2 years. That's not. He showed me contracts, client meetings. The address listed for his business is a UPS store mailbox. The client meetings were probably job interviews. "Sarah, your husband works part-time at a call center making $12 an hour." The sound she made wasn't quite a gasp, wasn't quite a sob, something in between, something broken. But the BMW, his clothes, the restaurants he takes me to, credit cards, all of them maxed out. He's been sued by 3 different creditors in the past 2 years. There's a garnishment order against his wages for unpaid debts. Each fact landed like a stone thrown into still water, ripples of realization spreading wider and wider. "Dad, how is that possible?" "He pays our bills. He handles our finances." "With what money, sweetheart?" The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Sarah?" "My savings account." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I gave him access to my savings account for joint expenses. But there should still be almost $30,000 in there. When's the last time you checked the balance?" "Derek handles all that. He says I shouldn't worry about financial details." Her voice was getting smaller with each word. "Oh God, Dad. What if?" "Sarah, I need you to log into your bank account right now. Check your balances." I heard the sound of fingers tapping on a keyboard, then a sharp intake of breath. It's almost empty. $312. But that's impossible. I had $28,000 saved up from my job at the marketing firm." "What job, Sarah?" "You quit the marketing firm over a year ago. Derek said I didn't need to work, that he made enough to support us both, that I should focus on making our house a home." Her voice cracked completely. "Dad, have I been living off my own money this entire time while thinking Derek was taking care of everything?" "I think that's exactly what's been happening." The phone clattered like she'd dropped it. I could hear muffled sounds, Sarah crying, moving around the house, opening drawers and cabinets. When she picked up the phone again, her breathing was ragged. The credit card bills. I found them. Dad, there are thousands of dollars charged to restaurants, clothing stores, car payments, all on cards in my name that I never signed up for. My hands tightened around the phone. Sarah, where are you right now? In Derek's office. There's a whole filing cabinet I've never seen before. Bank statements, loan applications. Her voice rose in panic. Dad, there's paperwork here for a home equity loan. For $55,000 against this house. It's dated last week. The betrayal was even worse than I'd imagined. Sarah, you need to listen to me very carefully. I want you to take photos of everything in that filing cabinet. Every document, every statement, every piece of paper. Why? Because Derek tried to take out a loan against my house without my knowledge. That's fraud, sweetheart. And if he's been using your identity to open credit accounts... Oh, God. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Dad, what do I do? I don't have any money. I don't have a job. I don't even have a car that isn't financed through credit cards I didn't know existed. First, you're going to come home. To your real home. The house Derek can't touch because it belongs to me. But all my things are still your things. We'll figure out the rest together. I heard a car door slam outside her house, then Derek's voice calling her name. He's back, Sarah whispered. Dad, I'm scared. Put me on speakerphone. Don't tell him you've discovered anything. Just act normal until I get there. You're coming here? Sarah, you're my daughter. Derek doesn't get to isolate you anymore, and he sure as hell doesn't get to steal from you in my house. Derek's voice grew louder as he entered the house. Sarah? Babe? Where are you? I'm here, she called back, her voice shakier than she probably intended. I heard Derek's footsteps on the stairs, moving toward his office where Sarah was standing surrounded by evidence of his deception. Sarah, I said quietly into the phone, whatever happens in the next few minutes, remember that you're not alone anymore. And remember that Derek needs you more than you need him. He's been living off your money in my house. He has no power here. Derek's voice was closer now. What are you doing in my office? I heard Sarah take a deep breath. When she spoke, her voice was stronger than it had been all morning. Derek, we need to talk. I made the drive to Sarah's house in 15 minutes, breaking every speed limit between my apartment and Maple Grove Lane. Through the phone, I'd heard Derek's voice escalating from confusion to anger as Sarah confronted him with the evidence she'd found in his filing cabinet. You went through my private papers? Derek's voice carried the indignation of someone caught in a lie. Sarah, those are confidential business documents. You had no right. Business documents? Sarah's voice was steadier now, backed by righteous anger. Derek, these are credit card applications in my name, bank statements showing my savings account being drained. And what's this loan application against the house? I can explain everything. If you just calm down and listen. I am calm, and I'm listening. Explain to me how you've been supporting us on a consulting income that doesn't exist. By the time I pulled into the driveway, Derek's BMW was still running in the street, the driver's door open, like he'd been preparing to leave in a hurry. Through the living room window, I could see them facing off in the middle of the room, Sarah holding a stack of papers, Derek pacing back and forth like a caged animal. I walked through the front door without knocking. My house. My rules. Derek, I nodded to him politely. Leaving so soon? His face was flushed, his carefully styled hair disheveled, and his polo shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in it. Andrew, this is between Sarah and me. It's a private matter. Nothing about my property is private from me. I moved to stand beside Sarah, who looked at me with grateful relief. Besides, Sarah asked me to come. Didn't you, sweetheart? Yes. Sarah's voice was clear and strong. Dad, Derek's been lying about everything. His job, his income, our finances. He's been living off my savings while pretending to support me. Derek's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides as he struggled to maintain his practiced smile. Sarah, you're taking everything out of context. Yes, I've had some setbacks, but every entrepreneur faces temporary challenges. What entrepreneur? I interrupted. Derek, we both know you work 20 hours a week at a call center. Your consulting business exists only on paper, and barely that. Derek's face went through several shades of red, starting with pink and deepening to burgundy. His mouth opened and closed twice before any sound came out. You had me investigated? What kind of controlling father? The kind who protects his daughter from con artists. I stepped forward, and Derek actually stepped back. The kind who wants to know why a man with no income and massive debts suddenly needed his daughter to cut contact with her only family. I never told her to cut contact with you? No. Sarah held up her phone. Then explain these text messages you sent from my phone while I was sleeping. Dad, I need some space to focus on my marriage. Please don't call for a while. Derek's face went pale. I was protecting you from stress? You were isolating me. Sarah's voice rose, months of suppressed frustration finally finding its way out. You answered my phone, deleted my messages, canceled plans with my father, and convinced me it was all my idea. I pulled out my own phone and opened my bank app. Derek, there's something else we need to discuss. These monthly payments you've been sending me, the ones you told Sarah were mortgage payments? Derek's eyes flicked between Sarah and me, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool evening air. They're rent payments. For the past 8 months, you've been my tenant. Both of you. Paying $1,500 a month to live in my house. Sarah spun to stare at me. Rent? Dad, what are you talking about? I handed her my phone showing the transaction history. Derek knew we didn't own this house. He's known from the beginning. The paperwork he handled through his lawyer friend was a rental agreement, not a purchase contract. Sarah's hands shook as she scrolled through the payment history. Every month, $1,500 from my checking account. She looked up at Derek, her face a mixture of hurt and rage. You've been paying rent with my money while telling me we were building equity? Derek's face went through several shades of red before settling on purple. His hands fluttered near his pockets, then dropped to his sides like dead weights. Sarah, baby, I was going to tell you eventually. I just needed time to get my finances straightened out. How much time? How many more months were you planning to steal from me? I wasn't stealing. I was managing our household finances while building my business. What business? Sarah's voice climbed higher. Derek, you work at a call center. You have no business. You have no income. You have no money except what you've taken from me. Derek stepped back as if I'd physically pushed him. His voice climbed higher, taking on a whining quality I'd never heard before. Fine. Yes, I've had some financial difficulties. Yes, I've had to be creative about managing our resources, but everything I did was for us, Sarah. To give you the life you deserved. The life I deserved? Sarah laughed, but the sound came out sharp and bitter. Derek, the life I deserved was honesty. It was respect. It was a husband who didn't lie to me about every aspect of our relationship. Derek turned to me, his desperation finally showing. This is your fault. You're poisoning her against me. Sarah was happy before you started interfering. Sarah was isolated, I corrected. There's a difference. She chose me. She chose our life together. She chose the fiction you created. I stepped closer to Derek, close enough to see the sweat beading on his forehead. She chose a successful businessman who loved her, not a fraud who was using her as a personal ATM. Derek stepped back as if I'd physically pushed him. His voice climbed higher, taking on a whining quality I'd never heard before. You want to know the truth? Fine. The truth is that Sarah needed someone to take care of her because she was falling apart after her mother died. The truth is that she was desperate and lonely and grateful for any man who paid attention to her. The truth is, the slap echoed through the living room like a gunshot. Sarah's handprint was clearly visible on Derek's cheek as he staggered backward. "Get out." Sarah's voice was deadly quiet. "Get out of my house. Get out of my life. Get out." Derek touched his cheek where Sarah's handprint was clearly visible, his eyes wide and blinking rapidly. "Sarah, you don't mean—" "I mean every word." Sarah turned to me. "Dad, how quickly can we change the locks?" Derek stepped backward until his legs hit the coffee table. His hands flew up in front of his chest as if to ward off a physical blow. "You can't just kick me out. I have rights. I've been living here for 8 months. As my tenant," I reminded him, "and I'm hereby giving you notice to vacate. 30 days, as required by law." "30 days?" Sarah shook her head. "No. I want him out today." Derek's face contorted, his mouth twisting into an ugly grimace. His voice dropped to a hiss. "Sarah, please. You're making a mistake. Without me, you have nothing. No job, no income, no future. You need me." Sarah looked at Derek for a long moment, and I watched something shift in her eyes. The fear was gone, replaced by something harder and more determined. "Derek, I had a father who loved me unconditionally for 32 years before I met you. I had a career before you convinced me to quit. I had savings before you drained them. I had confidence before you undermined it. I had a family before you isolated me from them." She stepped closer to him, no longer intimidated. "I don't need you. I never needed you. You needed me." Derek stared at me for a long moment, his chest heaving. Spittle gathered at the corners of his mouth as he breathed through clenched teeth. His eyes darted toward the door, then back to Sarah, like a cornered animal looking for escape routes. "Fine," he said, his voice cracking on the word. "But don't come crying to me when you realize what you've thrown away. Don't come begging when you figure out that your precious father won't be around forever to solve your problems." He headed for the door, then stopped and turned back. "And Sarah? When you're sitting alone in this house wondering why no other man wants a 32-year-old divorcee with no job and no future, remember that you chose this." Sarah didn't flinch. "Derek, when I'm sitting in this house surrounded by people who actually love me, I'll remember that I chose family over a fraud." Derek slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Through the front window, we watched him throw his overnight bag into the BMW and peel out of the driveway with a screech of tires. Sarah sank onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. When she looked up at me, her eyes were red but clear. "Dad, I'm so sorry." "About everything. About choosing him over you? About the money? About tonight's dinner?" I sat down beside my daughter and pulled her into a hug. "Sarah, you don't have anything to apologize for. You were manipulated by someone who's very good at manipulation." "How did you know?" "About Derek, I mean. You never liked him, but you never said anything." I smoothed her hair the way I used to when she was small and had nightmares. "Because you loved him, and I love you. Sometimes love means waiting for someone to see the truth for themselves instead of forcing them to see it." Sarah leaned against my shoulder. "I feel so stupid." "You fell in love with someone who lied to you about who he was. That doesn't make you stupid. That makes you human." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, father and daughter in the house I'd bought for her future. Outside, the streetlights were coming on one by one, and somewhere down the block, a dog barked at the evening joggers. "Dad? Yes? Are we still family?" I tightened my arms around her. "Sarah, we've always been family." Derek couldn't change that, no matter how hard he tried. "Even after everything I put you through?" "Especially then." 3 days later, Sarah and I were sitting in her kitchen, our kitchen, sharing a belated Thanksgiving dinner. The turkey was smaller this time, just big enough for 2, and the stuffing was made from a box instead of my grandmother's recipe, but it was perfect anyway. Dad, can I ask you something? Of course. Sarah set down her fork and looked at me across the table. When you bought this house, did you always plan to keep it in your name as some kind of backup plan? I considered the question carefully. Over the past 3 days, as we'd sorted through the wreckage of Derek's deception and started the process of reclaiming Sarah's financial identity, we'd had many honest conversations. This felt like another important one. I plan to transfer the deed to you on your 30th birthday, I said finally. That was about 6 months ago. Sarah's hand paused halfway to her water glass. Why didn't you? Because by then Derek had already started isolating you from me. The Sunday dinners had stopped. The phone calls were getting shorter. You were apologizing for things that didn't require apologies. I reached across the table to cover her hand with mine. I kept the house in my name because some part of me was worried about exactly what ended up happening. You thought Derek was going to leave me? I thought Derek was going to hurt you somehow. I wasn't sure how, but a man who needs his wife to cut contact with her family is usually hiding something. Sarah nodded slowly. Dad, I need to tell you something too, about why I really quit my job at the marketing firm. I waited, letting her find her words. Derek didn't just suggest I quit. He made me quit. He said that working outside the home was causing me stress, that I was bringing negative energy into our marriage. But really, she took a shaky breath. He was jealous of my independence, of my income, of the fact that I had somewhere to go every day that didn't revolve around him. The pieces clicked into place. He wanted you financially dependent on him. Except he didn't have any finances for me to depend on. So he made me financially dependent on myself while pretending he was taking care of everything. Sarah's laugh held no humor. It's almost brilliant in a horrible way. Over the next hour, we talked through the practical details of rebuilding her life. Sarah would need to find new employment, rebuild her credit, and legally separate her finances from Derek's fraudulent activities. I would transfer the house deed to her name immediately, a decision I should have made months ago. What about dating? She asked as we cleared the dinner dishes. Someday, I mean, when I'm ready to trust someone again. What about it? Will you do background checks on every man I bring home? I grinned. I make no such promises. I have a very thorough lawyer now. Sarah laughed, and the sound filled the kitchen with warmth. Dad, I want to host the next Thanksgiving here. A real one this time, with your famous stuffing and Mom's cranberry sauce recipe and anyone else we want to invite. Anyone else? Mrs. Henderson from next door to your place. She's been alone since her husband died, and maybe some of the people from the elementary school when I start teaching again. Sarah's eyes brightened with plans and possibilities. I want this house to feel like a home where family and friends are always welcome. That sounds perfect. As evening settled over Maple Grove Lane, Sarah and I moved to the living room, where a fire crackled in the fireplace. The grandfather clock ticked steadily in the hallway, and through the windows we could see the warm lights of neighboring houses where other families were ending their own Thanksgiving celebrations. Dad, there's something I've been thinking about since Derek left. What's that? All those months when I was pulling away from you, when I was making excuses for Derek's behavior and believing his lies about what was healthy for our marriage, some part of me knew something was wrong, but I ignored it because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that if I lost Derek, I'd be alone. Afraid that maybe he was right about me being too dependent on you, too needy, too much trouble. Sarah's voice got quiet. After Mom died, I felt like such a burden on you. Like you'd already sacrificed so much of your life taking care of me, and if I couldn't make my marriage work, I'd be failing you somehow. I set down my coffee cup and turned to face her fully. Sarah, honey, you have never been a burden to me. Not when you were 2 and had nightmares every night for 6 months. Not when you were 16 and we spent 3 hours every evening on algebra homework. Not when you were 25 and called me crying about your job, and not now. But you gave up so much. I gave up nothing. I gained everything. I reached for her hand. Sarah, being your father has been the greatest privilege of my life, watching you grow up, helping you through difficult times, celebrating your successes. That's not sacrifice. That's love." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but they were the good kind this time. The kind that comes from relief and gratitude and the deep security of being unconditionally loved. "I love you too, Dad." "I know you do, sweetheart." "I've always known." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to glowing embers. Outside, the neighborhood was settling into the peaceful quiet of a holiday evening well spent. "Dad?" "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on us." "Sarah, I would never give up on you. You're stuck with me for life." She smiled, the kind of smile that starts small and grows until it takes over her whole face. "Good, because I'm planning to need my dad for a very long time." "Then it's a good thing I'm planning to be here." Family is what remains when everything else falls apart. Family is the foundation that makes everything else possible. And family is what Sarah and I had rebuilt together in the living room of the house that had always been her home, despite every attempt to tear us apart. The next morning brought an unexpected phone call that would make our victory complete. "Mr. Martin? This is Detective Rodriguez with the County Fraud Unit. We received a complaint about identity theft and financial fraud involving Derek Thompson. Could you and your daughter come in to file a formal report?" Sarah looked at me across the breakfast table, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. "Dad, did you?" "I called my lawyer yesterday morning. He said what Derek did to you, opening credit accounts in your name, draining your savings, attempting to take loans against property he doesn't own. Those aren't just civil matters. They're felonies." 2 hours later, we sat in Detective Rodriguez's office as Sarah provided a detailed account of Derek's crimes. The evidence was overwhelming. Fraudulent credit applications, forged signatures, unauthorized access to bank accounts, and attempted mortgage fraud. "Mrs. Thompson, based on what you've told me and the documentation you've provided, we have sufficient evidence to arrest your husband on multiple felony charges," Detective Rodriguez said, tapping his pen against a thick file folder. "Identity theft, wire fraud, forgery, and attempted grand theft. He's looking at potential prison time." Sarah's hands trembled as she signed the complaint. "How long before something happens?" "We'll have a warrant issued today. Given that he's been unemployed and has no significant assets, he's considered a flight risk. We'll pick him up this afternoon." Derek was arrested at 3:15 that afternoon outside the call center where he worked his part-time job. I know because Mrs. Peterson called to tell me she'd seen it on the local news. Derek Thompson, 35, led away in handcuffs while his co-workers watched through the windows. "The reporter said he's being charged with multiple felonies," Mrs. Peterson told me over the phone, barely able to contain her excitement. "They showed footage of him being put in the police car. He looked absolutely terrified." Sarah was quiet when I told her. She sat on the couch in what was now officially her living room. I'd had the deed transferred that morning and stared at her hands. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" "I keep thinking about the Derek I thought I married," she said finally. "The successful businessman who swept me off my feet. That person never existed, did he?" "No, he didn't. But the woman who believed in love and took a chance on what she thought was happiness, she's real, and she's sitting right here with me." The trial took place 4 months later. Derek pled guilty to avoid a longer sentence, but even with the plea deal, he received 3 years in state prison. His parents hired expensive lawyers, but there was no defending the evidence Sarah had photographed in Derek's office. The local newspaper covered the sentencing. "Local man sentenced to 3 years for defrauding wife," read the headline. The article detailed how Derek had systematically stolen from Sarah while pretending to support her, culminating in his attempt to fraudulently obtain a loan against property he didn't own. Richard and Patricia Thompson left town shortly after the sentencing. The house they'd lived in for 20 years went up for sale with a motivated seller sign that stayed in the yard for months. On the day Derek was sentenced, Sarah and I had dinner at the Italian restaurant where she'd had her first job interview in 8 years. She'd gotten the position teaching 3rd grade at Peterson Elementary, the same school she'd attended as a child. The principal said something interesting during my interview, Sarah told me as we shared a bottle of wine. She said I had a quality she rarely sees anymore, someone who's been through real adversity and came out stronger. What did you tell her? That I learned the difference between people who support you and people who need you to support them. Sarah raised her glass. And that I'm lucky enough to have a father who taught me that real family never abandons you, even when you abandon them. We clinked glasses as the evening news played on the restaurant's television. The anchor was discussing Derek's sentencing, showing file footage of him being led away in handcuffs 6 months earlier. "Any regrets?" I asked. Sarah looked at the television screen where Derek's mugshot filled the frame, then back at me. "Just one. I regret it took me so long to realize that the best man in my life was the one who'd been there all along." 6 months after Derek began serving his sentence, Sarah hosted our first real Thanksgiving dinner in her house. Mrs. Henderson came, along with 3 teachers from Sarah's school and the elderly couple from next door whose son was deployed overseas. As I carved the turkey, a proper 20-pound bird this time, I thought about the text message that had started everything. "You won't be joining us. My husband prefers to keep it only family." Derek had been wrong about so many things, but especially about what family means. Family isn't about exclusion or manipulation or control. Family is about showing up, standing up, and never giving up on the people you love. And sometimes, when a family is threatened, it's about making sure that the people who try to destroy it face the full consequences of their actions. If you enjoyed this story and it resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to hear more stories about family, justice, and the importance of standing up for yourself and the people you love. Share your own thoughts about protecting family and ensuring that fraud doesn't go unpunished in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the best way to protect the people you love is to make sure that those who hurt them can never do it again.